Witness isn't just a story. It's a powerful reminder of the quiet strength behind justice, especially in places most people overlook. If this is your first time here, feel free to drop a comment below and share where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon. We lift up voices that need to be heard every single day. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. She walked into the lobby of the Avalon Regency Hotel in downtown Chicago just before 9 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning, dressed in a worn denim jacket, faded jeans, and sneakers clearly seasoned by long walks. Ariel Dawson didn't look like the kind of guest the staff was used to seeing, or, more truthfully, the kind they thought belonged. Her steps were steady, purposeful. She moved like someone who knew exactly where she was going, even if everyone else assumed she didn't. But there was something else about her, something in the way she carried herself, that quieted the space around her, behind the marble. Front desk, Brent Wallace stood tall with folded arms, his stare sharp and full of unspoken judgment. The hotel gleamed golden accents, soft jazz drifting through the air. Businessmen sipped espresso in leather chairs. Women in high-end coats scrolled their phones on velvet couches. No one expected the disruption that was about to unfold. Ariel reached the front desk. She didn't stumble. She didn't have a reservation, penthouse, suite, under Ariel Dawson, she said. Her voice was calm, smooth, but carried the weight of authority. Brent didn't even check. His smile was polished, but shallow. "Are you sure you're in the right hotel?" he asked, loud enough to draw attention. "The penthouse isn't for everyone." The words hit like a slap dot across the room. A magazine lowered. A coffee cup paused. Mid-sip, whispers rippled, not out of curiosity, but disbelief. Still, Ariel didn't blink. She tilted her head, the smallest smile on her lips. "Maybe you should check your system." Brent gave a quiet, condescending laugh, leaning forward like he was delivering a secret. "I know our clientele," he said. "You're not on that list." He didn't try to hide it. For him, it was policy. Two clerks nearby, Marcy and Tyler, exchanged glances. Marcy smirked. Tyler stayed glued to his keyboard. A security guard near the elevator shifted, preparing to step in. Still, Ariel stood calmly, not because she wasn't angry, but because she had lived this moment far too many times, and because she knew something none of them did. In 5 minutes, they'd all know it too. She pulled a black credit card from her bag, sleek, elegant. Her name, Ariel Dawson, embossed in silver. She held it out. Brent didn't take it. Instead, he waved to security, then muttered something into his radio. "We'll need to hold this for fraud inspection," he said, locking the card in the reception safe with a loud, deliberate click. "This isn't the kind of place you can just walk into and pretend to be someone you're not." Gasps. Phones discreetly lifted. Red recording lights betrayed those pretending not to watch. Ariel looked him in the eyes. And then she spoke the sentence that would haunt that lobby for years. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." Brent scoffed. But then the doors behind Ariel opened. A sharply dressed woman entered with purpose. "Camille, Ariel, executive assistant." She gave a silent nod. The ownership documents had been pulled. Legal was standing by. Camera feeds were active, because Ariel hadn't come to check in. She had come as the CEO of the very hotel that was trying to push her out. In fact, she owned the entire Avalon Regency chain, built it from the ground up. Every law, every detail, every brick. She turned slowly, addressing the now silent crowd. "I want everyone here to listen carefully," she said, her voice rising just enough to fill the space. "My name is Ariel Dawson. This hotel, this entire chain, belongs to me." The room froze. Brent's face went pale. Marcy dropped her watch. Tyler stopped typing. "I built this company, so every guest, no matter what they look like, where they come from, or what they wear, is treated with dignity. And today, in the lobby of my own hotel, I've been shown exactly who doesn't deserve to be here. Nobody moved, and then system-wide alerts fired across the hotel's internal servers. Brent, Marcy, and Tyler, access revoked, logins expired. The safe reopened automatically. A staff-wide message appeared. New owner. Directive in progress. Executive orders to follow. And Ariel. She hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. She spoke with the power of principle and truth, because this wasn't about one rude exchange. It was about a culture, the kind that hides behind velvet chairs and gold trim, and she had just turned the key that would expose it all. What followed would shake far more than that lobby, and no one watching that day would ever forget it. The moment a billionaire woman in denim tore down a system designed to exclude her, and she was just getting started. The second Ariel Dawson revealed her identity in that echoing hotel lobby, silence fell like a curtain. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from AW, but from impact, the collision of truth against long-standing illusion. Yet, as stillness gripped the room, a deeper, more unsettling question seeped through the walls of the Avalon Regency. How did it come to this? How had subtle cruelty become so ordinary, so easy to miss, yet impossible to ignore? For Ariel, this public reckoning was only the surface ripple of something far more insidious. It wasn't about a single moment, it was about the rot beneath, the polish, the culture that had been allowed to grow under a facade of hospitality. Her confrontation at the front desk wasn't a mistake, it was a symptom, and as she scanned the room, frozen faces of employees, stiff postures of onlookers, she realized this wasn't spontaneous. It was the end result of patterns that had gone unchecked for far too long. Camille, her assistant, stepped beside her and handed over a printed report. Ariel didn't need to read it. She knew exactly what it said. Over the last 6 months, the signs had been surfacing, scattered but undeniable. Unexplained booking issues for guests of color. Repeated complaints about cold treatment during check-in, vague but consistent mentions of unfriendliness from a specific team. At first, it seemed like coincidence. But now, in the heart of it, there was no denying the truth. This wasn't theoretical. It was systemic. Brent Wallace, still rooted behind the desk, looked pale and stunned. His voice had vanished, his composure cracked. He'd spent years refining his image, praised for leadership, confidence, high standards. But those standards had always been a mask, a tool he used to decide who belonged, not based on merit, but appearance. It wasn't airy, worn clothes that made him question her. It was her blackness, paired with humility. That was enough for him to dismiss her, without hesitation. He hadn't seen a CEO, he'd seen a stereotype, and he had acted on it. Marcy, still seated, avoided eye contact. The smirk she wore minutes ago had vanished, replaced by stiff unease. Tyler tapped nervously on his tablet, pretending to work, pretending not to be part of what had just unfolded. Security officers lingered. Nearby, waiting for orders, no one was giving any more. Ariel drew a breath. Her voice was low, unwavering. "This was never about a single insult," she said, now speaking to the whole room. "It's about the walls you build around people who don't fit your definition of luxury. The quiet choices, the silent rules, that tell someone they aren't welcome. That," she said, "is the real virus here. It doesn't wear a name tag. It wears etiquette, policy, tone. It hides behind manners." Guests shifted uncomfortably. What had seemed like a dramatic incident was now something deeper. One woman in a tailored black suit lowered her phone. She had lifted it to record, but now, she understood. This wasn't about going viral. It was about accountability. Hotels are meant to offer comfort, safety, a moment to breathe. But here, bias had been bottled and served with chilled wine. Subtle, polished, and far too easy to ignore. Camille stepped behind the desk, logging into the staff system with executive access. She moved with purpose. Transaction records, booking data, surveillance footage, and with every file, Ariel's suspicions became facts. High-tier bookings, regularly flagged for extra verification, just because the names or profile photos didn't align with Brent's vision of the right kind of guest, black, Latino, or simply not visibly wealthy. These were the people marked. Brent had led the way. Marcy and Tyler had followed. Ariel turned toward the entrance, where more staff had gathered, drawn by the shift in energy. Among them was Angela Wu, the housekeeping manager. She'd been with the hotel since it opened. Her eyes scanned the scene, not confused, but knowing. This wasn't new. She had seen this before, not this moment, but the culture behind it. And now, she saw it cracking. Angela stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Miss Dawson, there's something you need to know." Ariel nodded. "This isn't new. It didn't start today. There's a list." A hush fell again. An internal watch list for guests who don't fit the profile. Brent created it. "I was told to report any room service requests from those guests directly to him, not through standard protocol." The air thickened. Brent opened his mouth to protest, but Ariel's glare stopped him mid-breath. "How long?" she asked. Angela hesitated. 6 months, maybe longer. Ariel turned back to Brent. "And in that time, how many promotions did you receive? How many bonuses, while excluding the very people this hotel was built to welcome?" Brent's voice cracked. "I was protecting the brand, the image." Ariel raised her hand. That was enough. "No," she said. "You were protecting your prejudice and dressing it up as luxury to make it acceptable." Her words hit like thunder. Not shouted, but unshakably clear. That is what truth sounds like. Angela stepped back, but her words had already shifted. The room. Staff began whispering. Quiet stories emerged. Admissions. Acknowledgements. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. And suddenly, the moment at the front desk wasn't isolated anymore. It was a mirror, held up to a culture that had learned to discriminate quietly, but effectively. And Ariel Dawson, in denim and dignity, had just shattered the glass. It would change everything. Facing the full weight of her establishment, her staff, her guests, and the bystanders who had chosen silence, Ariel Dawson met each gaze with quiet conviction. Then, she said something none of them expected. "I don't want to just fire people today. That's too easy. I want to confront what allowed this to happen in the first place." She stepped forward, past Brent, past Marcy and Tyler, and turned to the guests now holding phones loosely at their sides, unsure of whether to record or simply stand still. "You came here expecting luxury," she said, "but ask yourself, what does that mean? Is it marble floors and sparkling chandeliers? Or is it knowing that everyone here is treated with dignity, no matter what they wear or what they look like?" No one answered, because the truth had already been spoken, and now it echoed in the bones of that building, undeniable and irreversible. What came next wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be neat or simple, but it would be real, and for the first time in a long time, it would be honest. In the digital age, truth has a new witness, the lens. It doesn't blink. It doesn't forget. It doesn't look away when discomfort fills the room. And on that day, inside the gleaming lobby of the Avalon Regency, truth showed up, not just in Ariel Dawson's voice, but in the quiet hum of recording devices and the flickering glow of live streams held in the hands of people who couldn't unsee what they'd witnessed. At first, it seemed like a private confrontation, a CEO calling out a prejudiced employee. Maybe it would end in firings, a PR statement, a few headlines. But something bigger stirred the moment. Ariel's voice rose, not in anger, but in clarity. And that's when the story became unstoppable. Among the witnesses was Jenna Morales, a travel blogger and well-known advocate for diversity in luxury spaces. She had been tucked in the corner of the lobby cafe, sipping an overpriced espresso and drafting a post on inclusion in five-star hospitality. She hadn't planned to film anything that day, but when she looked up and saw Ariel calm, dignified, and being dismissed, something inside her shifted. By the time Brent Wallace summoned security, Jenna had already hit go live. Her phone, angled subtly from her seat, captured everything. The disdain in Brent's voice, the silence of his colleagues, the gasps from the crowd, and Ariel's searing, measured response. The stream's title was simple: Luxury Hotel Just Humiliated the Owner. Within 15 minutes, it had passed 50,000 live viewers. Comments flew like sparks. Is this real? She owns the place. Fire him. Fire them all. This is why I stopped staying in these places. The public wasn't just watching. They were participating. They were witnessing. They were refusing to look away. As Ariel addressed the room, the lobby shifted. Guests who had once been passive observers now looked uneasy, realizing something uncomfortable. Their silence had made them accomplices. A few looked down at their hands, at the phones they hadn't raised. Others shifted, guilt crawling up their spines. Still, Jenna filmed. But this wasn't about viral justice anymore. It was about what came next. Would Ariel lash out in anger? Would she storm out? Would she crumble? She did none of those things. Instead, she walked to the center of the lobby, not as a CEO reclaiming power, but as a woman delivering truth. The world had waited too long to hear. She gestured to the grandeur around her. We call this a place of excellence, she said. But what kind of excellence excludes? What kind of excellence turns dignity into a privilege instead of a right? The words didn't echo. They landed, because in that moment, excellence was being redefined, not by gold-plated decor, but by how people are treated when no one thinks they matter. And Ariel Dawson had made sure. Now, everyone was watching. Her voice was steady, but the pain beneath it quivered like a cello string pulled too tight. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was giving voice to the unseen and unheard. Guests quietly turned away. Workers overlooked for promotions. Customers judged by color before comfort. Tyler, still frozen behind the desk, looked as if he'd only just started to understand what was unfolding. Brent tried to step forward, maybe to explain, maybe to salvage his authority, but Ariel lifted a single hand, graceful, commanding, and he stopped, because in that moment, he no longer owned the room, and neither did his excuses. From her spot nearby, Jenna Morales moved in closer, her camera now fully visible. Others began gathering around her, drawn by the quiet intensity of the moment. Her voice, calm yet sharp, narrated for thousands of live viewers tuning in. What you're witnessing right now is history. Ariel Dawson, owner of this hotel chain, is calling out systemic discrimination inside her own building. As if cued by her words, other guests began recording. Some hesitated, uncertain. Others didn't. Within moments, phones were everywhere, lifted like torches in a digital coliseum. The arrogance that once guarded the front desk began to melt. Not under outrage, but under something stronger. Truth, backed by evidence. Upstairs on the mezzanine, a young intern named Malik stood silently, heart pounding. He had spent months biting his tongue, witnessing the quiet codes, the subtle patterns, the calculated errors in reservations. Now, for the first time, he saw a force powerful enough to break through the polished armor of institutional bias, and it was all being streamed live. When Ariel turned to face the cameras, it wasn't out of ego, it was intentional, it was strategic. To those of you watching, she said, meeting Jenna's lens with clarity. Justice begins where silence ends. I didn't come here today to make a scene. I came because I believed this place, my place, stood for something better. But now I see. That belief must be rebuilt. Her words rippled across the live stream, like a stone cutting through still water. She hadn't once raised her voice, and yet she had silenced an entire institution. Just then, the hotel's PR director appeared, newly arrived, and clearly caught off guard. Simon Caldwell, slick in a tailored suit, wore the trained smile of someone used to extinguishing crises before they caught fire. "Miss Dawson," he began, trying to control the moment. "Perhaps we can continue this conversation in private." "No." Ariel's interruption was calm, but final. "We've had too many of these conversations behind closed doors. That's the problem. This one stays out here, where the people who need to hear it can." Simon faltered, then turned awkwardly to Jenna's camera, summoning his PR instincts. "Let's be clear, this was a misunderstanding." But Jenna cut in, firm, unsparing. "Sir, she was told she didn't belong. She was humiliated, and now the world is watching. Don't insult our intelligence by pretending we didn't all hear it." The crowd stirred. Tension crackled in the air. Ariel's gaze never left Simon's. "You don't control the narrative anymore," she said evenly. "The truth is out, and the cameras are still rolling." The live stream hit 100,000 viewers. Then 15000 comments flooded in. "This is justice. This hotel is done. She's changing the game." Brands affiliated with the hotel began posting quiet statements of review and reassessment. Influencers started canceling events. The story had outgrown everyone in the room. It had become a movement. And still, Ariel stood, composed in control. The hotel's security team approached cautiously, unsure who they now reported to. One of them asked, quietly, "Ms. Dawson, should we step in?" And the next word out of her mouth would define not just the moment, but the future of the institution she built. Ariel shook her head. "No, let them film. Let the world see, not just what happened here, but what has to change." In that moment, the cameras weren't just capturing history, they were preserving it, making sure that no PR-crafted apology, no committee-approved statement, could rewrite the truth of what had just taken place. And so, as Ariel turned back to her staff, she didn't speak as a furious executive. She spoke as a disappointed leader, standing in the ruins of something she had built, and now had to rebuild, from the ground up. And the cameras kept rolling, because the camera never blinks. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's full, heavy with memory, loaded with guilt, brimming with choices no one dared make. That's the silence that filled the Avalon Regency's marble lobby when Ariel Dawson stopped speaking. And in that silence, something shifted. A fault line cracked beneath every polished surface, beneath every hierarchy built on quiet exclusion. Brent Wallace, the acting general manager, no longer stood tall. His shoulders drooped, his complexion drained. The armor of arrogance that once protected him had collapsed, crushed under the weight of public outrage. His eyes darted, looking for an exit, for backup, for a buffer that no longer existed. The power had shifted, and everyone in the room could feel it. Then a voice, unexpected, soft, but steady. "I need to say something." All eyes turned toward the front desk. A young woman in a tailored gray vest stepped forward. Her name tag read Eliza Monroe. She had been there the entire time, silent, watchful, standing behind Brent as he led the humiliation. But now, she stepped out of the shadows. She could no longer stay invisible. Ariel met her eyes, calm, open, waiting. "I was told to stay quiet," Eliza began, her voice trembling but gaining strength with each word. "I was told professionalism meant agreeing, that disagreeing meant insubordination. But what I witnessed today, and what I've witnessed too many times before, it wasn't professionalism, it was prejudice." The room fell still. The air thickened. "I knew who you were the moment you walked in," she continued, her gaze locked on Ariel. I saw your name on the reservation this morning when Brent asked if the guest had arrived, and I said yes. He told me not to say anything. He said he'd handle it. Brent's face turned even paler. That's not true, he stammered. Eliza, you're twisting. No, sir, she said, cutting him off, her voice stronger now. You told me to stay back because you didn't want another scene like Chicago. I didn't know what that meant until now. A murmur swept through the lobby. The phrase "another scene like Chicago" hung in the air like a warning that had finally been unmasked. Jenna Morales, still filming, slowly turned her lens toward Eliza. Her audience leaned in, tens of thousands now, hanging on every word. Elisa took a breath, and for the first time in her career, she did not look down when speaking to a superior. I've seen you question every black guest who checked in alone. I've watched reservations disappear, and when I reported it to HR, they told me I misunderstood protocol. Ariel stepped forward, her voice soft but undeniable. You didn't misunderstand. Eliza, you're seeing this all wrong. Brent's voice cracked as he stepped forward, desperation creeping in. This is getting out of hand. You're a trainee. You don't understand the complexities of hotel operations. But Eliza didn't flinch. I understand the difference between complexity and cruelty, she said, cutting through his words like a blade. The room seemed to shift. The power dynamic had fully unraveled, and Brent no longer held any thread of control. Then, from the side entrance of the lobby, another voice rose, calm, authoritative. A tall woman in her early 50s entered, wearing a sharp navy suit and a Skyline Hospitality badge on her blazer. The air stilled as the room turned to look. It was Lorraine, King Skyline's director of compliance. She'd received a flurry of alerts, frantic texts, urgent calls, and a direct link to Jenna's livestream. She didn't come to watch. She came to act. I've seen enough, Lorraine said, her tone low but unmistakably final. Brent's posture stiffened with false hope. Lorraine, thank God. This is a misunderstanding. It's social media twisting things out of context. We should talk privately. But Lorraine's eyes were like steel. No, Brent. This will be handled exactly where it started, out here, in the open. She walked toward Ariel and gave a respectful nod. Miss Dawson, I've already spoken with headquarters. Your authority, as always, is absolute. But as Director of Compliance, I want to formally stand behind whatever decisions you make today. You're not alone in this. Ariel returned the nod, small, resolute. Then she turned to face the room, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of everything that had brought them to this moment. The calm center of the storm. For years, Skyline Hospitality has claimed to stand for inclusion, she began. But too many within our walls have used that shield to quietly uphold the very systems. We say we fight. That ends today. Not with hashtags, not with carefully worded memos, with action. She turned to Brent. His hands trembled. Sweat beaded at his brow. Brent Wallace, she said, her voice even and unflinching. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. All access revoked. Your conduct has not only violated our values, it has compromised our integrity. Security approached quietly, respectfully. Brent didn't move. Couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The power he had weaponized now stood in judgment of him. But Ariel wasn't done. She turned to Eliza. You had the courage to speak the truth, even when it meant risking everything. That's the kind of leadership Skyline needs. Eliza's eyes widened in disbelief. Miss Dawson, I didn't say any of this to get anything in return. I know, Ariel said gently. That's why you deserve more. She took a step closer. Starting today, you'll be mentored under our leadership initiative for ethical hospitality. If you accept, your first assignment will be to help build anti-bias training for all front-facing staff across all Skyline properties. Emotion welled in Eliza's eyes. She could only nod, her voice caught in her throat, and in that moment, something profound shifted, not just a reckoning, but a reversal. The invisible had become seen, the silent had found their voice. And those who once defined respect through exclusion were now being held accountable by it. Jenna's camera panned slowly, capturing the expressions of disbelief, of awakening, of quiet resolve. The live stream was still rolling, but the story had already changed. Across the lobby, phones continued to record, but now they captured something more than scandal. They documented transformation. The comments pouring in weren't just angry anymore. They carried something rare, hope. This is what leadership looks like. Finally, someone in power doing the right thing. Ariel Dawson for Senate. And at the center of it all stood Ariel Dawson, not victorious, not vengeful, but steady. Because this moment had never been about retribution. It was always about restoration. The power dynamic had shifted, but the mission had only just begun. As the last echo of applause faded, and Brent Wallace was quietly escorted out through the same revolving doors he once believed he controlled, a new atmosphere took hold inside the Avalon Regency, solemn yet electric. Ariel remained in the center of it all, standing firmly on the same marble floors where, only hours earlier, she'd been dismissed and humiliated. But this time, she stood with people, not just behind her, but believing in her. Guests, staff, even bystanders, now looked at her not just with shock, but with trust. Still, Ariel knew better than anyone. Real change doesn't begin and end with a single act of accountability. She hadn't built an empire to make an example out of a few prejudiced employees. She had built it to rewrite the rules, the ones that had long gone unspoken in her industry. Turning to Lorraine King and Eliza Monroe, her voice was calm, unwavering. This isn't over. This is where it starts. I want a full internal audit, not just here at Avalon, but across every Skyline property in the country. I want data, patterns. I want every complaint that's been dismissed to be reviewed. We're not just cleaning up a lobby, we're rebuilding the foundation. Lorraine gave a firm nod. We'll launch full transparency protocols. Guest feedback will no longer disappear into unread inboxes. Eliza, still wide-eyed with the weight of her new responsibility, nodded too. Whatever it takes. Outside, the story had already become a national moment. Jenna Morales's livestream had gone viral, spreading across platforms with astonishing speed. News outlets picked it up within the hour. Headlines flashed on screens and news tickers. Black CEO exposes discrimination in her own hotel and fires leadership on the spot. Change starts here. But Ariel wasn't looking at cameras anymore. Her focus was forward, locked on what came next. The very next morning, a letter appeared on Skyline's official website and was delivered directly to every employee in the organization. It read, in part, prejudice, disguised as professionalism, will no longer find shelter within our walls. If you've been silenced, know this. We are listening now. If you've silenced others, know this. We are watching. Skyline Hospitality does not exist to protect power. It exists to serve with transparency, with integrity, and with courage. Asterisk, asterisk, and from that moment forward, the industry would never be quite the same. That message, simple yet powerful, sparked a fire. Staff from hotels across the country began coming forward, sharing stories, experiences, and confessions. Some painful, some brave. A movement was born, not of vengeance, but of reckoning and repair. Weeks later, Skyline launched a new training program, co-designed by Eliza and a panel of inclusion experts, rolling it out across all properties. Anonymous reporting systems were embedded in every office. Regional directors were reshuffled. Patrick Harris, whose name had surfaced in Brent's last desperate defense, was formally dismissed after an internal investigation. No one regardless of rank, was immune from scrutiny. The media dubbed it the Dawson Doctrine. But Ariel didn't seek credit. She sought culture. She wanted every future guest walking into a Skyline hotel to feel something unspoken but undeniable. You belong here. From the depths of shame arose something greater than justice. It was systemic change, and in that, Ariel Dawson didn't just reclaim her lobby, she reclaimed the future in the heart of Boston's luxury district. A powerful story unfolded, one that would shake not just the marble floors of a hotel lobby, but the very conscience of an entire industry. Ariel Dawson, a quiet, yet commanding black woman, dressed simply, walked into her own hotel, the Avalon Regency, and was met not with warmth or welcome, but with scorn, prejudice, and dismissal. The staff didn't see her identity, her worth, or her ownership. They saw only the surface, and that was their greatest mistake. Within minutes, what began as an attempt to demean a woman based on assumptions spiraled into a public reckoning. What they didn't know was that Ariel wasn't just a guest. She was the CEO, the very person who built the chain they represented. With calm resolve, quiet strength, and unflinching dignity, she not only fired the staff who wronged her, but initiated sweeping reforms that would echo across the hospitality world. With allies like Eliza Monroe and voices like Jenna Morales capturing every truth, Ariel didn't just fight back. She led forward. This story is not just one of humiliation and justice. It is a story of transformation. It's about standing your ground when the world tells you to move. It's about choosing accountability over revenge, values over vanity, and change over comfort. Ariel Dawson reminded us all that true leadership isn't about asserting dominance. It's about creating space for dignity, for truth, and for every unheard voice. So, what lesson do we carry forward? That we must never assume someone's worth by their appearance. That the quietest person in the room might hold the greatest power. And that when injustice is met with courage, real change becomes possible, not just in hotels or offices, but in our homes, communities, and everyday interactions. If Ariel's story moved you, inspired you, or made you think deeper, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and most importantly subscribe to this channel, so we can keep telling stories that matter. Your support gives us the strength to uncover more truth, more hope, and more reasons to believe in a better, more just world. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.